Hey there, everybody. It's Mike DiLisio. Today I'm going to be taking a look at the solo mode for Tang from designers Francesco Testini and Pierluca Zisi and publisher Thundergriff Games. Tang is a beautiful game about creating the most beautiful garden. Does that beauty carry over into the gameplay? Well, let's head over to the table. I'll show you quickly how the solo game plays, and then I'll come back and give you my final thoughts. Okay, here we see the setup for a solo game of Tang Garden. The first thing I want to talk about are components. What are added or removed for the solo game as compared to the multiplayer game? Well, the first big difference is that this player board, which is where you track a lot of the information in the multiplayer game, is not used at all in the solo game. So that gets removed completely. Secondly, you're going to have different lantern tokens. These are specific to the solo game, these 4 lantern tokens, and they're going to help you manipulate and mitigate some of the difficulties that you might find in the game. Otherwise, there's really not a lot of difference in the components. You're going to have the decoration cards. They're going to have one face-up card next to each stack of the tiles. That's also a difference. So the decoration cards, you're going to have a deck here, and then you're going to have one face-up card next to each of the stacks of the tiles. The last thing I'm going to mention is that you're going to have 8 of these total landscape tokens here, and this grid that these tokens outline is going to be the focus of the play area in the solo game of Tang Garden, because the main difference in the gameplay is that to win the game, you need to have a tile in every one of these spaces that are outlined with these landscape tiles. If ever there's a time that you cannot place a combination of a tile and the landscape card that's next to it, you automatically lose the game. And so some of these lantern tokens actually will help you get out of a jam if you're in a position where you can't place that pair. But if you're able to do that, if you're able to get all of the tiles into that predetermined grid, then you're going to have some final scoring and you can see how you've done. So you can lose before you even get to the end game if you're ever not able to put out a pair of a tile and a landscape card, or excuse me, decoration card that is next to it. So just very briefly, what you're going to do on your turn is you're going to choose one of these stacks of tiles, and you're going to place the tile and you're going to put out the decoration that is next to that. So for example, if I wanted to take this water tile here, I would take this tile and I would place it in a legal spot. So for example, I might place it right here, okay? Now, I'm going to get 1 coin for matching that edge. If I were able to close off a water spot, I would also get another coin. I would get 2 coins in that place. But now, once I've done that, I also have to look at this corresponding decoration card, which in this case is a willow tree. And this has to be placed on a corresponding green area. Now, luckily I can do that because there's, oops, I've also broken my tree, because there's a spot there. So I would place that there. What I would then do is take that card and put it in a discard pile. I would also go to the opposite corner and I would remove that decoration card as well. And I would put the tile from there into an area, basically that's going to be a place that I could get tiles from with one of my lantern tokens. Then you refill and you turn over the tiles, you put out 2 new decoration cards, and you continue just in that manner. You have to be able to place both the tile and the corresponding decoration. So let's say I wanted to go here and I place this here. I'd get my coin for matching those up. I didn't close off that area, so I'd only get 1 coin. And then I would have to place out a pavilion. This pavilion could go right here. All right. Then I would do the exact same thing again, where I would discard the card, discard the one on the opposite side, take this tile, put it in that little area, flip, flip, and keep going, okay? Now, when you get one of these landscape tokens, let's say I'm able to place a tile here, and now I've got this landscape token that's taken away. What you're going to do is take whatever the corresponding small or large landscape tile is. In this case, this is a small. You take one of the two that are showing, and you'd place it somewhere that you'd want to, but you would also have to place one on the opposite side. So let's say if I placed one here, I'd also have to place one there. Okay, it works the same way with the large landscape tiles as well. Now, you start the game with one character, just as in the normal game, that has its particular power, but you can also influence more characters. And the way that you do that is through coins. And it's in increments of 10. So after you've gained 10 coins, you can influence a character. You have characters available to you there as you would in the normal game. And let's say that I'd had 10 and I decide, well, I want to have the lady as my new character. I would go ahead and take that card, the corresponding miniature, and now I can place the Empress. And based upon what her particular scoring conditions are, I might place her in a particular way. But right now, the only spot I have available to me is inside of this pavilion. And so let's say I was having her face that way. I'm not even really taking anything into account right now. I'm just showing you for demonstration purposes. At 20, 30, and 40, you can get new influenced characters. And these are going to be your primary scoring method if you make it to that end game. The other thing I want to briefly talk about are these landscape tokens that are specific to the solo game. This particular token allows you to select a pair, but only put out the tile. So if you're in a position where you can put out the tile, but you can't put out the corresponding decoration token, you might flip over that lantern token. The next one is to choose one from the garden display. So you've been placing these tiles out here as ones that were opposite of ones you've chosen. Now that one would allow you to take one of these and go ahead and put it out. This one is going to allow you to discard all 4 of those decoration cards and replace them with new ones, which can be very, very powerful. And this one allows you to reuse the ability of one of your exhausted lantern tokens. So you can see that these are all ways to get you out of a jam if you're in a position where you can't put out the pair of tile and decoration card that you would like to. So the game ends in defeat if you cannot get all of the tiles into that grid. It ends in a victory if you are able to do so. If you're able to get all those tiles out and you've put out your characters and you have them facing in the particular directions, you would add up your coins, and based upon the amount of coins that you got, it's going to show you how well you did. So it gives you a little bit of a scoring matrix depending on how many coins you've gotten throughout the game. All right, well, that should give you a pretty good idea on how the solo game plays. Now let's head over and I'll give you my final thoughts. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a pretty good idea on how the solo mode for Tang Garden plays. There are some significant differences between the solo game and the multiplayer game. You're essentially doing the same types of actions, but the gameplay does differ in a relatively significant way. But let's talk first about the solo benchmarks that I like to focus on when I talk about the review for a solo game. One of the things I like to consider is the win condition. Is there a clear win-loss condition, or is it a beat your high score variant? And Tang Garden is a bit of a hybrid, wherein there is a clear win-loss condition. If you don't get all of those tiles out in the predetermined grid, then you've lost the game. However, if you do successfully fill that grid of tiles, then you have a score system that gives you a bit of a matrix to see how well you do. And I'm really glad that that aspect is in there, both aspects. I like that there's a clear win-loss. I like that it's not just keep going until you can't place another tile. I really want that pressure of feeling like I need to get all the tiles out or else I lose. But then still being able to take into account that line of sight scoring for the different characters that you've put out. Because really, That's a huge part of the game. And if that aspect wasn't there, I really don't think that there would be much of a point. If it really is just getting the tiles out and you've won, I don't think that would be very satisfying at all. So I like this hybrid system. I like this idea of you have to get all the tiles out to even be considered for a win. But then once you've done that, if you've done that, now you can take into account those different scoring aspects for the characters, where they're placed, what they're seeing. Are they looking at the tiles? Are they looking at the landscapes? I really, that's one of my favorite parts of the multiplayer game. And so I'm glad that it's here in the solo game as well. I also like to talk about setup and teardown. There is a bit of an issue here in the solo game of Tang Garden, in that it's a simple game. At heart, it's a very simple tile laying game with some variable scoring based upon what characters you have out, some player powers as well based on the characters, where you place them, what landmarks they're seeing. It's not a complicated game. However, it takes a while to set up. I mean, you have these gorgeous components, and make no mistake, these are some of the most gorgeous components you're ever going to see in a game, but there's a lot of them. It takes a bit of time to set up. It's not a game you're going to quickly get out on the table. Tearing down is also an issue because while there is a custom insert in the game, it's not necessarily the best custom insert I've ever seen. It looks like everything could fit and should fit, and it can, but it's really not intuitive. It's a bit of a bear. There's can be certainly some frustration involved in putting the game back in the box. I've seen other people online lamenting about their difficulty in getting Tang Garden back into the box, and it's a shame because it seems like a missed opportunity. Obviously, money and time was spent on designing the custom insert, but it seems like there was a little something missed because the final product is not as good as it could or should be, and it makes it a bit of a barrier in getting the game played. Rules. The rules for the game are a mixed bag. Generally speaking, everything is there. Everything you need to know to play the game is there. But there are so many icons in this game. And again, I just need to emphasize that it's a simple game. And so when you're having to do a lot of referencing to the rule book to remember, okay, so what does this power do? What does this icon do? What is this special power? That's a bit problematic. I do wish that the iconography was better done, more intuitive, because I didn't find it terribly intuitive. Now, the more that I've played the game, it's become a little bit more internalized. But the first few games were really, really an exercise in going back and forth to that rule book, referencing it. And honestly, still now that I've played it many, many times, I still find myself referring to the rule book from time to time because the icons are just not intuitive enough for me to have them completely internalized. And so that is something that I do wish was a little bit better. However, the rules are all there. They're fine. The solo rules specifically are clear as far as how that differentiates from the standard game. There was really no ambiguity there. I felt pretty comfortable that I knew how the solo game played because I played this multiplayer first. Then I went back and read the solo rules, and I felt pretty confident that I was doing everything I needed to be doing to have the designer intended experience. So, my overall solo experience, what do I think? Well, I had a hard time with Tang Garden because there are some significant issues, some of which I've mentioned here in the solo benchmarks. I feel like it's a game that the user interface, if you want to put it in those terms, is not as smooth and intuitive and elegant as it really could be. I feel like there's a barrier to learning the game based on the iconography. There are also just some production issues. Many of the tiles I found personally difficult to discern what the icons were. Is that an icon? Can I put this decoration here? Now, there is some intuition involved there. Okay, this is a water tile. Clearly, I should be able to put a fish or a water plant on that tile. So I have to acknowledge that there's intuition there. You're not going to necessarily be putting a pavilion in the middle of the water. Okay, so I get that. But there are also times where I just felt like the watermarks were a little bit too light. So not every water tile is going to have a place where you can put a decoration. Um, can I put, or this be the same type? Okay, is this a bridge tile or is this, again, as you play the game more, that becomes more and more clear. But the first few games I think were a little bit tough just because some of the usability was not as elegant as I would have liked. So that is something that I need to point out, is that I feel like they make it a little bit tough to get into the game. That being said, I do like the game. I enjoy, and I don't always love tile laying games. Carcassonne is a game that I know is very well loved and admired, and I understand the appeal, but I never really got that into Carcassonne. Um, they're hit or miss for me, tile laying games. And Tang Garden is one where it has so many things going for it. I do love the theme. I do love the idea of the line of sight. I think that's a really clever way of doing variable point scoring. I like the three-dimensional element of the game, although even that can be problematic. There are many times when I'm playing the game where I'm having to physically get up and move and look around. And that's not necessarily a problem if the game is designed to be that way, but I'm not sure that you're necessarily meant to get up and look, and maybe you are. And if you are, then it's not an issue, but I found it a little bit odd playing in essence, a Euro game, and a lot of times I'm getting up and moving around as if it were like a dexterity game. So that's something that took me a little bit of getting used to. But to some extent, I can give that a pass because I really like that scoring element of the characters being on the board and looking in different directions and looking for particular tiles or particular panoramas. So I go back and forth on this because there's so much about the game I like, but I also feel like some of the production choices made, some of the production issues get in the way of enjoying the game. So I'm kind of split here. Overall, I feel like the game experience is such that I still find myself coming back to it, even though there are some annoyances every time that I'm packing the game away or having to look in the rule book to refer to a icon that isn't necessarily as clear to me as it could have been. So it's a game that I feel like if it didn't have these production issues would be a bit of a higher score, but I'm still going to give it a seal of approval. I'm going to rate the Tang Garden solo game a 7 out of 10. I feel like it is something that is still worth your time as a solo gamer if the theme appeals to you, if the idea of a three-dimensional element of the game where you actually have some line of sight to consider, which I think is a clever scoring mechanism that I don't see in Euro games often, if ever. If that's appealing to you, I do think it's worth your time, but I do think you need to be aware that there are some production issues that you might find troublesome that you should at least account for if you're looking at whether this is a game for you. So, all that being said, thank you so much for your time as always, and have a great day.